Well, good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, August 1st, and we're here for our Family Reading Circle, Part 2. Looks like we have a few more in attendance than we had last time, which is wonderful. For those of you who may not know, we are making our way through Robert Louis Stevenson's exciting coming-of-age story called Treasure Island. We read only one chapter last time. We just did chapter 1, and probably the most comment I got in response to that reading last week, besides this was a great thing to do, was that it was too short. So we probably should read more than one chapter, and we will go ahead and read a second chapter and a third chapter, so chapters 2 and 3 tonight. And was somebody who was here, you're all muted right now. If you'd like to unmute yourselves, go ahead. Does anybody want to give us a little recap of what we looked at last week? How the story went so far?
Go ahead, Jim.
No, go ahead.
So Jim Hawkins lives with his parents at the Admiral Benbow Inn, and this old sea captain is living with them called Billy Bones, and he's told Jim to look out for a one-legged man. And Jim has nightmares, and the captain is very nasty and suspicious, and the doctor, Livesey, wants him to stop drinking and threatened him not to be nasty or else he'd call him to trial. Because
Dr. Livesey is also
the magistrate.
The magistrate in the town, right. So he has the ability to throw him in jail if need be. And I'm glad you did that, because I was reading through chapters 2 and 3 and didn't want to forget and accidentally tell too much of the story. We are going to read 2 chapters today, and as we did last week, if everyone's game for this, we're going to assign parts. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts plus the narrator tonight. Does anyone have a preference for a part that they would like to claim? We have Black Dog, Billy Bones, Jim Hawkins, Mrs. Hawkins, which is a very small part, and Dr. Livesey. Anyone in particular?
I can do Dr. Livesey.
I'll do Black Dog.
All right, that's a pretty small part. And Robert, you're muted. If you want to,
I can do Billy Bones.
You want to do Billy Bones? Okay. Yeah. Who wants to do Jim Hawkins? Jim Hawkins and Mrs. Hawkins. Mrs. Hawkins is a tiny part. I think she has one line.
I can do Jim.
Who said I'll do Jim? Elizabeth?
Elizabeth, yeah.
Okay. Unless Carol, I see Kara is here. Kara, would you like a part? Kara does not have a microphone, at least not one. There she goes. Now she just has to turn it on. If Kara turns her microphone on, we can see if she would like to read a part.
I'm here.
Okay, we have Jim Hawkins and Mrs. Hawkins left for parts. Would you like to be one of those?
Sure, whatever you need me to do.
Let's have you be Jim Hawkins.
Okay.
All right, and who's going to be Mrs. Hawkins?
I'll be Mrs. Hawkins.
Okay, that's Kim. So Kim is going to be Black Dog and Mrs. Hawkins. Robert is going to be Billy Bones. Kara is going to be Jim Hawkins, and Elizabeth is going to be Dr. Livesey, and I will read the narration. Kim, you're in yellow, okay? You're in yellow and light purple, almost pinkish. Robert, you're Billy Bones, which is green. Kara, you are Jim Hawkins, which is blue. And Elizabeth, you are Dr. Livesey, which is like a dark purple. And you'll know when we get the parts, and I will read the narrator part. And just a little vocabulary before we start. We also went through some vocabulary at the end last time and thought maybe it would be better do that at the beginning. Who can tell me what a cutlass is? C-U-T-L-A-S-S. What's a cutlass?
Curved sword.
Yeah, it's a curved sword. It can be straight, and it usually has a hilt or a handle that has a shield in front of it. It's the typical pirate sword that you see. We're going to come to that word in this passage. Also, what does the word Gatling mean? G-A-T-T-L-I-N-G. Does anyone know? And again, we're not trying to embarrass anybody for not knowing. I just thought...
Type of machine gun.
Well, there is a Gatling gun. That is a different word. This word Gatling refers to a low, indistinct conversation, kind of like a murmur.
Ah.
Okay. And then the one last word I think we might not be familiar with is the word chine, C-H-I-N-E, and that refers to a person's backbone. So cutlass, Gatling, and chine all appear in this chapter. What I'd like to suggest is that we pay attention and read our parts, and if there's any call for sound effects or crowd noises, that you make them. If you could do your best not to drop things, move things, and make a lot of noise that's picked up by your microphone, because that ends up being in the background. That makes the reading going. We are not trying to produce an audiobook here. We are trying to have some fun. So people are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Let's just have a good time. Is everybody ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody who's not ready to go? All right. Chapter 2 of Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island is called Black Dog Appears and Disappears. It was not very long after this that there occurred the first of the mysterious events that rid us at last of the captain, though not, as you will see, of his affairs. It was a bitter, cold winter with long, hard frosts and heavy gales, and it was plain from the first that my poor father was little likely to see the spring. He sank daily, and my mother and I had all the inn upon our hands, and were kept busy enough without paying much regard to our unpleasant guest. It was on one January morning, very early, a pinching, frosty morning, the cove all gray with hoarfrost, the ripple lapping softly on the stones, the sun still low and only touching the hilltops and shining far to seaward. The captain had risen earlier than usual and set out down the beach, his cutlass swinging under the broad skirts of the old blue coat, his brass telescope under his arm, his hat tilted back upon his head. I remember his breath hanging like smoke in his wake as he strode off, and the last sound I heard of him as he turned the big rock was a loud snort of indignation, as though his mind was still running upon Dr. Livesey, who, if you will recall, had reprimanded him at the end of the previous chapter. Well, Mother was upstairs with Father, and I was laying the breakfast table against the captain's return when the parlor door opened and a man stepped in on whom I had never set my eyes before. He was a pale, tallowy creature, wanting 2 fingers of the left hand, and though he wore a cutlass, he did not look much like a fighter. I had always my eye open for seafaring men with 1 leg or 2, and I remember this one puzzled me. He was not sailorly, and yet he had a smack of the sea about him. I asked him what was for his service, and he said that he would take rum, but as I was going out of the room to fetch it, he sat down upon a table and motioned me to draw near. I paused where I was, with my napkin in my hand.
Come here, Sonny,
says he.
Come nearer here.
I took a step nearer.
Is this here table for my mate Bill?
He asked with a kind of leer. Oh, that's still me. I told him I did not know his mate Bill, and this was for a person who stayed in our house whom we called the captain.
Well,
said he,
my mate Bill would be called the captain as like as not. He has a cut on his cheek and a mighty pleasant way with him, particularly in drink, has my mate Bill. We'll put it, for argument like, that your captain has a cut on one cheek, and we'll put it, if you like, that cheek's the right one. Ah, well, I told you. Now, is my mate Bill in this here house?
I told him he was out walking.
Which way, Sonny? Which way is he gone?
And when I had pointed out the rock and told him how the captain was likely to return and how soon, and answered a few other questions,
Ah,
said he,
this'll be as good as drink to my mate Bill.
The expression of his face as he said these words was not at all pleasant, and I had my own reasons for thinking that the stranger was mistaken, even supposing he meant what he said. But it was no affair of mine, I thought, and besides, it was difficult to know what to do. The stranger kept hanging about just inside the inn door, peering round the corner like a cat waiting for a mouse. Once I stepped out myself into the road, but he immediately called me back, and as I did not obey quick enough for his fancy, a most horrible change came over his tallowy face, and he ordered me in with an oath that made me jump. As soon as I was back again, he returned to his former manner, half fawning, half sneering, patted me on the shoulder, told me I was a good boy, and he had taken quite a fancy to me.
I have a son of my own,
said he.
as like you as 2 blocks, and he's all the pride of my heart. But the great thing for boys is discipline, sonny, discipline. Now, if you had sailed along of Bill, you wouldn't have stood there to be spoke twice, not you. That was never Bill's way, nor the way of such as sailed with him. And here, sure enough, is my mate Bill, with a spy-glass under his arm, bless his old heart, to be sure. You and me'll just go back into the parlor, sonny, and get behind the door, and we'll give Bill a little surprise, bless his heart, I say again.
So saying, the stranger backed along with me into the parlor and put me behind him in the corner so that we were both hidden by the open door. I was very uneasy and alarmed, as you may fancy, and it rather added to my fears to observe that the stranger was certainly frightened himself. He cleared the hilt of his cutlass and loosened the blade in the sheath, and all the time we were waiting there, he kept swallowing as if he felt what we used to call a lump in the throat. At last in strode the captain, slammed the door behind him, without looking to the right or left, and marched straight across the room to where his breakfast awaited him.
Bill,
said the stranger in a voice that I thought he had tried to make bold and big. The captain spun around on his heel and fronted us. All the brown had gone out of his face, and even his nose was blue. He had the look of a man who sees a ghost, or the evil one, or something worse, if anything can be, and upon my word, I felt sorry to see him all in a moment turn so old and sick.
come, Bill, you know me, you know an old shipmate, Bill, surely,
said the stranger. The captain made a sort of a gasp.
Black dog,
said he.
And who else?
Returned the other, getting more at his ease.
Black dog as ever was, come for to see his old shipmate Billy at the Admiral Benbow Inn. Ah, Bill, we have seen a sight of times, us two, since I lost them 2 talons.
Holding up his mutilated hand.
now look here.
Said the captain.
You run me down. Here I am. Well, then speak up. What is it?
That's you, Bill.
Returned Black Dog.
You're in the right of it, Billy. I have a glass of rum from this dear child here, as I've took a liking to, and we'll sit down, if you please, and talk square like old shipmates.
When I returned with the rum, they were already seated on either side of the captain's breakfast table, Black Dog next to the door, and sitting sideways so as to have one eye on his old shipmate and one, as I thought, on his retreat. He bade me go and leave the door wide open.
None of your keyholes for me, Sonny,
he said, and I left them together and retired into the bar. For a long time, though, I certainly did my best to listen. I could hear nothing but a low gattling, but at last the voices began to grow higher, and I could pick up a word or two, mostly oaths from the captain.
No, and an end of it.
He cried once and again.
If it comes to swinging, swing all, I say.
Then all of a sudden there was a tremendous explosion of oaths and other noises. The chair and the table went over in a lump. A clash of steel followed, and then a cry of pain. And the next instant I saw Black Dog in full flight and the captain hotly pursuing, both with drawn cutlasses and the former streaming blood from the left shoulder. Just at the door, the captain aimed at the fugitive one last tremendous cut, which would certainly have split him to the chine had it not been intercepted by our big signboard of Admiral Benbow. You may see the notch on the lower side of the frame to this day. That blow was the last of the battle. Once out upon the road, Black Dog, in spite of his wound, showed a wonderful clean pair of heels and disappeared over the edge of the hill in half a minute. The captain, for his part, stood staring at the signboard like a bewildered man. Then he passed his hand over his eyes several times and at last turned back to the house.
Jim,
says he.
Rum.
And as he spoke, he reeled a little and caught himself with one hand against the wall.
Are you hurt?
Cried I.
Rum,
he repeated.
I must get away from here. Rum.
I ran to fetch it, but I was quite unsteadied by all that had fallen out, and I broke one glass and fouled the tap, and while I was still getting in my own way, I heard a loud fall in the parlor, and running in, beheld the captain lying full length upon the floor. At the same instant, my mother, alarmed by the cries and fighting, came running downstairs to help me. Between us, we raised his head. He was breathing very loud and hard, but his eyes were closed and his face a horrible color.
Dear, dearie me,
Cried my mother.
what a disgrace upon this house, and your poor father's sick.
In the meantime, we had no idea what to do to help the captain, nor any other thought but that he had got his death hurt in the scuffle with the stranger. I got the rum, to be sure, and tried to put it down his throat, but his teeth were tightly shut and his jaws as strong as iron. It was a happy relief for us when the door opened and Dr. Livesey came in on his visit to my father.
Oh, doctor,
We cried.
What shall we do?
where is he wounded?
Oh,
That's
sorry.
That's
Hold
okay.
on, it's 1 sec. I apologize. There we go. Wounded? A fiddlestick's end,
Said the doctor.
Oh, whoops. No
Said the
more
doc-
wounded than you or I. The man has had a stroke, as I warned him. Now, Mrs. Hawkins, just you run upstairs to your husband and tell him, if possible, nothing about it. For our part, I must do my best to save this fellow's trebly worthless life. Jim, you get me a basin.
When I got back with the basin, the doctor had already ripped up the captain's sleeve and exposed a great sinewy arm. It was tattooed in several places.
Here's luck. A fair wind.
And
Billy Bones his fancy.
were very neatly and clearly executed on the forearm. And up near the shoulder there was a sketch of a gallows and a man hanging from it, done, as I thought, with great spirit.
Prophetic.
Said the doctor, touching this picture with his finger.
And now, Master Billy Bones, if that be your name, we'll have a look at the color of your blood. Jim,
He said.
are you afraid of blood?
No, sir.
Said I.
Well then,
Said he.
you hold the basin. Well, that's narration, actually.
Oh, and with and with that he took the lancet and opened a vein. A great deal of blood was taken before the captain opened his eyes and looked mistily about him. First he recognized the doctor with an unmistakable frown. Then his glance fell upon me and he looked relieved. But suddenly his color changed and he tried to raise himself, crying,
Where's Black Dog?
There is no black dog here,
said the doctor.
except what you have on your own back. You've been drinking rum, you have had a stroke, precisely as I told you, and I have just, very much against my own will, dragged you head foremost out of the grave. Now, Mr. Bones.
That's not my name.
He interrupted,
Much I care.
returned the doctor.
It's the name of a buccaneer of my acquaintance, and I call you by it for the sake of shortness. And what I have to say to you is this. One glass of rum won't kill you, but if you take one, you'll take another, and I stake my wig. If you don't break off short, you'll die. Do you understand that? Die, and go to your own place like the man in the Bible. Come now, make an effort. I'll help you to your bed for once.
Between us, with much trouble, we managed to hoist him upstairs and laid him on his bed, where his head fell back on the pillow as if he were almost fainting.
Now, mind you,
Said the doctor.
I clear my conscience. The name of rum for you is death.
And with that he went off to see my father, taking me with him by the arm.
This is nothing.
He said as soon as he had closed the door.
I have drawn blood enough to keep him quiet a while. He should lie for a week where he is. That is the best thing for him and you, but another stroke would settle him.
All right, end of chapter 2. Everybody give yourselves a round of applause. Yay. And I see we have Sarah with us. Sarah, we're glad to have you. Looks like you don't have a microphone.
She says she has no audio again.
She can't hear anything either?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's got to be
That's
something.
why I missed my
That's why
cue.
you missed your cue. Does she
Yeah.
have speakers on her computer?
I can ask her.
You know, this book was written a while ago because, like, they thought that Dr. Livesey helped the guy by drawing blood, but he probably just made him weaker.
Yep, that's how they killed George Washington, right?
Yeah.
All right, there's a phone number you can call in, and I don't know it off the top of my head. I can tell it to. Are you still there, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'm still here.
What are you doing? What are you getting with?
She didn't reply. I'm not sure if she might be doing two things at once.
Okay.
Oh, she
All
said,
right.
yeah, but it's not hooked up to the internet.
Okay. Well, then I'm sorry we can't. I don't
Okay.
have the phone number in front of me, unfortunately. We can get that phone number to her for future meetings.
Okay.
It's on the email that comes with the
Oh,
invitation.
But I can't give her my
Yes,
phone
you can give her
number
the
for
phone
me?
number. She can use that phone number.
Okay.
All right. You can copy and paste that to her?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's look at chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called The Black Spot. There is a word in here that maybe we don't know, maybe we do. It's the word apoplexy. Does anybody know what the word apoplexy means?
Some kind of fit.
What did you say, Kara?
Oh, it means a fit often brought on by either excitement or overindulgence in food.
Yeah. It's actually the old word for a stroke. It's what they used to say when they meant a stroke or a cerebral hemorrhage. And that is what Billy Bones had here. And that word is going to come up in the chapter. We only have 3 parts in this chapter. We have Billy Bones, Jim Hawkins, and Black Dog. Would anybody like to claim a part? Or should I assign?
I think just listen for this one because I had a lot last time.
Okay, that's fine. Anybody else? Who had a small role last time?
I did, but I'm going to actually just listen because I'm actually going to be probably leaving before the chapter's over.
All right. So Elizabeth and Robert, would you like a part?
Sure.
Would you?
Timmy, I think you should take a part.
I think you should too.
You're very good at it.
We have Billy Bones, Jim Hawkins, and Black Dog. Why don't we let Robert be Jim Hawkins? Robert, would you be willing to be Jim Hawkins again? Jim Hawkins? Robert is muted. Kimmy, you were Black Dog. You want to be Black Dog again? You did a good Black Dog.
Okay.
And Elizabeth, how about you be Billy Bones?
Sure.
All right. Did you get anywhere with Sarah? Did you get her the phone number?
The last thing I gave it to her, she said, call it. I said, yeah. Then she asked how long it was, and I told her, and she said, okay. So I'm not sure if she's going to try to call it now.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and proceed with the reading. So this is chapter 3 of Treasure Island. The title of it is The Black Spot. About noon, I stopped at the captain's door with some cooling drinks and medicines. He was lying very much as we had left him, only a little higher, and he seemed both weak and excited. Oh, Elizabeth, Billy Bones is yellow, Jim Hawkins is green, and Kim Black Dog is blue.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry. Jim.
He said he.
You're the only one here that's worth anything, and you know I've been always good to you. Never a month, but I've given you a silver 4-penny for yourself, and now you see, mate, I'm pretty low and deserted by all, and Jim, you'll bring me 1 noggin of rum now, won't you, matey?
The doctor,
I began, but he broke in cursing the doctor in a feeble voice, but heartily.
Doctors
Elizabeth?
Is all swabs,
he said.
And that doctor there, why, what do we know about seafaring men? I've been in places hot as pitch, and mates dropping around with yellow jack, and the blessed land a-heaving like the sea with earthquakes. And what would the doctor know of lands like that? And I lived on rum, I tell you. It's been meat and drink, and my aunt and wife to me. And if I'm not to have my rum now, I'm a poor old hoke on a lee shore. My blood'll be on you, Jim, and that doctor swab.
And he ran on again for a while with curses.
Look, Jim, how my fingers fidges.
He continued in the pleading tone.
I can't keep him still, not I. I haven't had a drop this blessed day. That doctor's a fool, I tell you. If I don't have a drain of rum, Jim, I'll have the horrors. I seen some on him already. I seen old Flint in the corner there, behind you. As plain as print I seen him, and if I get the horrors, I'm a man that has lived rough, and I'll raise Cain. Your doctor himself said 1 glass wouldn't hurt me. I'll give you a golden guinea for a noggin, Jim.
He was growing more and more excited, and this alarmed me, for my father, who was very low that day and needed quiet besides, I was reassured by the doctor's words now quoted to me, and rather offended by the offer of a bribe.
I want none of your money,
said I.
But what you owe my father, I'll get you 1 glass and no more.
But when I brought it to him, he seized it greedily and drank it out.
Aye,
said he.
That's some better, sure enough. And now, matey, did that doctor say how long I was to lie here in this old berth?
A week at least,
said I.
Thunder!
He cried.
A week! I can't do that. They'd have the black spot on me by then. The lubbers is going about to get the wind of me this blessed moment. Lubbers as couldn't keep what they got and want to nail what is another's. Is that seamanly behavior now, I want to know? But I'm a saving soul. I never wasted good money of mine, nor lost neither. And I'll trick 'em again. I'm not afraid of 'em. I'll shake out another reef, matey, and daddle 'em again.
As he was thus speaking, he had risen from bed and with great difficulty, holding to my shoulder with a grip that almost made me cry out, moving his legs like so much dead weight. His words, spirited as they were in meaning, contrasted sadly with the weakness of the voice in which they were uttered. He paused when he had gotten to a sitting position on the edge.
That doctor's done me,
he murmured.
My ears is singing. Let me back.
Before I could do much to help him, he had fallen back again to his former place, where he lay for a while silent.
Jim,
he said at length.
You saw that seafaring man today?
Black dog,
I asked.
Ah, black dog,
says he.
He's a bad un, but there's worse that put him on. Now, if I can't get away nohow, and they tip me the black spot, mind you, it's my old sea chest they're after. You get on a horse. You can't you? Well then, you get on a horse and go to, well, yes I will, to that eternal Dr. Swab and tell him to pipe all hands, magistrates and sich, and he'll lay him aboard at the Admiral Benbow, all old Flint's crew, man and boy, all of 'em that's left. I was first mate, I was, old Flint's first mate, and I'm the only one that knows the place. He gave it me at Savannah when he lay dying, like as if I was to now, you see. But you won't peach unless they get the black spot on me, or unless you see that black dog again, or a seafaring man with one leg, Jim, him above all.
But what is the black spot, Captain?
I asked.
That's a summons, mate. I'll tell you if they get that. But you keep your weather eye open, Jim, and I'll share with you equals, upon my honor.
He wandered a little longer, his voice growing weaker, but soon after I had given him his medicine, which he took like a child, with the remark,
If ever a seaman wanted drugs, it's me.
He fell at last into a heavy, swoon-like sleep, in which I left him. What I should have done had all gone well, I do not know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
If everything had gone all right,
what I
don't
should
know
have
what
done
would
had
say.
all gone well, I do not know. Probably I should have told the whole story to the doctor, for I was in mortal fear lest the captain should repent of his confessions and make an end of me. But as things fell out, my poor father died quite suddenly that evening, which put all other matters on one side. Our natural distress, the visit of the neighbors and arranging of the funeral, and all the work of the inn to be carried on in the meanwhile kept me so busy that I had scarcely time to think of the captain, far less to be afraid of him. He got downstairs next morning, to be sure, and had his meals as usual, though he ate little and had more, I'm afraid, than his usual supply of rum, where he helped himself out of the bar, scowling and blowing through his nose, and no one dared to cross him. On the night before the funeral, he was as drunk as ever, and it was shocking in that house of mourning to hear him singing away at his ugly old sea song. But weak as he was, we were all in the fear of death for him, and the doctor was suddenly taken up with a case many miles away and was never near the house after my father's death. I have said the captain was weak, and indeed he seemed rather to grow weaker than regain his strength. He clambered up and down stairs and went from the parlor to the bar and back again, and sometimes put his nose out the door to smell the sea, holding to the walls as he went for support, and breathing hard and fast like a man on a steep mountain. He never particularly addressed me, and it was my belief that he had as good as forgotten his confidences, but his temper was more flighty, and allowing for his bodily weakness, more violent than ever. He had an alarming way now, when he was drunk, of drawing his cutlass and laying it bare before him on the table. But with all that, he minded people less and seemed shut up in his own thoughts and rather wandering. Once, for instance, to our extreme wonder, he piped up to a different air, a kind of country love song that he must have learned in his youth before he had begun to follow the sea.
I'm going to say bye now, but thank you.
Okay.
It was very nice.
Good.
Bye.
So things passed until the day after the funeral, about 3 o'clock of a bitter, foggy, frosty afternoon, I was standing at the door for a moment, full of sad thoughts about my father, when I saw someone drawing slowly near along the road. He was plainly blind, for he tapped before him with a stick and wore a great green shade over his eyes and nose, and he was hunched as if with age or weakness, and wore a huge old tattered sea cloak with a hood that made him appear positively deformed. I never saw in my life a more dreadful-looking figure. He stopped a little from the inn, and raising his voice in an odd sing-song, addressed the air in front of him.
This is Pew.
Pew, then, not Black Dog?
Yep, sorry, it's Pew.
Will any kind friend inform a poor blind man who has lost the precious sight of his eyes, in the gracious defense of his native country, England, and God bless King George, where or in which or in what part of this country he may now be?
You are in the Admiral Benbow, Black Hill Cove, my good man,
said I.
I hear a voice,
said he.
a young voice. Will you give me your hand, my kind friend, and lead me in?
I held out my hand, and the horrible, soft-spoken, eyeless creature gripped it in a moment like a vice. I was so much startled that I struggled to withdraw, but the blind man pulled me up close to him with a single action of his arm.
Now, boy,
He said.
Take me in to the captain.
Sir,
Said I.
Upon my word, I dare not.
Oh,
He sneered.
that's it. Take me straight in, or I'll break your arm.
And he gave it, as he spoke, a wrench that made me cry out.
Sirs,
Said I.
it is for yourself, I mean. The captain is not what he used to be. He sits with a drawn cutlass. Another gentleman.
And I'll come now, march.
Interrupted he, and I never heard a voice so cruel and cold and ugly as that blind man's. It cowed me more than the pain, and I began to obey him at once, walking straight in at the door and towards the parlor, where our sick old buccaneer was sitting, dazed with rum. The blind man clung close to me, holding me in one iron fist and leaning almost more of his weight on me than I could carry.
Lead me straight up to him where I'm in view, and cry out, here's a friend for you, Bill. If you don't, I'll do this.
And with that, he gave me a twitch that I thought would have made me faint. Between this and that, I was so utterly terrified of the blind beggar that I forgot my terror of the captain, and as I opened the parlor door, cried out the words he had ordered in a trembling voice. The poor captain raised his eyes, and at one look the rum went out of him and left him staring sober. The expression of his face was not so much of terror as of mortal sickness. He made a movement to rise, but I do not believe he had enough force left in his body.
Now, Bill, sit where you are.
Said the beggar.
If I can't see, I can hear a finger stirring. Business is business. Hold out your left hand. Boy, take this left hand by the wrist and bring it near to my right.
We both obeyed him to the letter, and I saw him pass something from the hollow of the hand that held his stick into the palm of the captain's, which closed upon it instantly.
And now it's done,
said the blind man, and at the words he suddenly left hold of me, and with incredible accuracy and nimbleness skipped out of the parlor and into the road, where, as I still stood motionless, I could hear his stick go tap, tap, tapping into the distance. It was some time before either I or the captain seemed to gather our senses, but at length, and about at the same moment, I released his wrist, which I was still holding, and he drew in his hand and looked sharply into the palm.
10 o'clock,
He cried,
6 hours. We'll do them yet.
and he sprang to his feet. Even as he did so, he reeled, put his hand to his throat, stood swaying for a moment, and then, with a peculiar sound, fell from his whole height face foremost to the floor. I ran to him at once, calling to my mother, but haste was all in vain. The captain had been struck dead by thundering apoplexy. It is a curious thing to understand, for I had certainly never liked the man, though of late I had begun to pity him. But as soon as I saw that he was dead, I burst into a flood of tears. It was the second death I had known, and the sorrow of the first was still fresh in my heart. All right, that's the end of chapter 3. Congratulations, everybody. You did a really nice job reading. Everybody did. I think
Thank
the
you.
voices
Thank
were
you.
great, and it sounded good. Anybody have any comments about what we read tonight? Observations or thoughts to share?
The doctor's not really very nice.
Dr. Livesey.
No.
Well, he's harsh to that guy because he's.
I know, but he's not very compassionate.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very law and order, and he's going to be that throughout the whole book, I think. It's interesting that we read that Jim cries at the death of Billy Bones, but not at the death of his father. Not that he didn't, but that it's noted that he did this time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I guess it's just because the scene's right before us, and it was kind of third person. The father wasn't really in the room when he died. But everything's being kind of set up for, well, we'll see what happens next if you know the story. We are going to have to take a week off next week. We have a private meeting scheduled for next week. Let's just take a look at the Acoustic Gourmet schedule down here. We had Family Reading Circle tonight. We do have online fellowship this Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, if you're in a different time zone, you can click your time zone on our website here to see when that is. We'll be looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 3 for online fellowship. Next Monday, we have our third current events meeting. That is an unscripted discussion of the news of the day. We'll have a short lesson at the beginning, usually no more than 5 or 10 minutes. We have an orientation next week, but everybody's been here before. And as I said, normally we have our family reading on a Thursday night, but we have a private meeting on Wednesday night, so we're not going to do the Thursday night meeting. We will skip Family Reading Circle for next week and pick up again with it on Thursday, August the 15th. So I hope you'll join us for that. In the meantime, on Tuesday, August 13th, we are going to have our movie talk number 2. Movie talk number 1 was very popular. We looked at Saving Mr. Banks. We'll be looking at the movie The 100-Foot Journey, which is a very funny and heartwarming, touching story. You can watch the trailer here from a link on our website. And of course, just use the embedded link right in here to sign up for that session. I hope you'll join us for that session and any others that are available to you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about what we've done today?
Nope.
All right. If not, I want to thank you all for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing as many of you as can join us on our next session, which is this Sunday for online fellowship. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Have a good night.